Sometimes you're in a conversation, right? And you feel like you've got the basics covered, but you want to say something just perfectly. Like you want to acknowledge what someone said, maybe pivot a little, add a question, or even disagree gently, but without sounding too blunt.
Yeah, it's about getting past just swapping information. It's more like navigating the flow of ideas together, adding those layers, politeness, bit of nuance, making it feel really collaborative.
Exactly. That's step up in communication. And, well, that's exactly what we're diving into today. We're looking at those specific tools advanced conversational English phrases.
Right. And these aren't just like filler words. They're super functional. Native speakers use them all the time to make things smoother, clearer.
More connected.
Definitely. They're kind of the glue and the signals in a fluent chat.
So for this deep dive, we're drawing on this really helpful article. It collected a bunch of these phrases and, crucially, showed how they actually work, with examples.
Like a practical toolkit.
Pretty much. A toolkit for conversational finesse.
And our goal here, for you listening, is to unpack this resource with us. We want to pull out the really useful stuff, give you tools you can actually use.
Yeah, whether you're prepping for a big meeting, trying to understand something new in your field, or even just wanting, your everyday chats to feel more natural.
Understanding these phrases is really key.
So get ready. We're going to zero in on how these specific expressions can help you sound more confident, be more precise, and just connect better with people. Let's dig in.
Okay, so the article doesn't frame these as, complicated grammar things. Often they're short, set phrases. Their power is in their shared meaning, their function in the conversation.
Right. Signaling things.
Exactly. Signaling intent like, I hear you, or here comes a new idea, or I'm asking this, I agree, or even, I disagree, but gently.
Yeah, it gave that great example. Someone says, I think working from home is more productive. You could just say, I disagree. Pretty blunt. But it's so much smoother, more collaborative to use something like, that's a valid point, but have you considered the challenges with team collaboration?
Absolutely. That phrase, that's a valid point, but straight away shows you've listened, you respect their view before you add your own thought.
It shifts the whole feel.
Totally. It changes it from maybe a clash into more of an exploration, looking at different sides of the idea.
It really shows how these phrases do important social work, not just linguistic work, keeping things polite, managing who speaks when, making sure everyone feels heard, respectful, connected.
And that connection part is huge. The article notes they often feel a bit semi-formal, maybe even slightly idiomatic. But unlike true idioms like kick the bucket, where the meaning is totally separate, these phrases usually link pretty directly to what they do in the conversation. They help it flow naturally, not like robots talking.
Okay, let's get practical. Let's look at some specific types and examples the article brought up. Seeing them in action makes it click, right? How about phrases for introducing your own thoughts? But thoughtfully.
Yeah, there are some good ones. One that stood out to me from the article was, I can't help but wonder if, it's not a strong claim, it's more like a gentle way to express curiosity or maybe a slight doubt.
Ooh, that's a good one. Like the example they had about automation. Technology is making our lives so much easier. And the response, I can't help but wonder if it's also making us lose certain practical skills. See, it doesn't just deny the first bit.
No, it adds this layer of thoughtful concern.
Right.
Or maybe talking about diets, cutting out carbs is the fastest way to lose weight. You could say, I can't help but wonder if that's sustainable long-term for everyone. It brings up a possible issue without just shooting down the first idea, opens a new path for discussion.
That makes sense. You're signaling you're thinking critically, but not trying to shut the other person down. What about when you want to state your perspective clearly, but acknowledge it's your perspective? The article had, from my standpoint, it seems like.
Yes, that's very useful. It clearly flags it as your take, your interpretation. Say you're discussing hybrid work. The office is essential for team cohesion. You could respond, well, from my standpoint, it seems like hybrid models can also build cohesion if they're managed right, maybe even in new ways.
So you're offering a parallel view, not a direct attack, and framed as your view.
Exactly. It feels less confrontational, more open.
I like that. Okay, what about when someone says, or maybe something you read in the source material really jumps out at you? How do you highlight that specific thing?
The article had a couple for that. Things like, what strikes me the most is, or one thing that stands out to me is, they help you pinpoint a specific detail or idea that you find particularly important or interesting.
Like if you're discussing, say, a complex climate report and someone mentions changing weather patterns, you could jump in with, yes, and what strikes me the most is just how fast those patterns are changing compared to the historical data.
Exactly. You're zooming in on what resonated with you. Or maybe talking about globalization. Globalization has connected the world. You might add, yeah, and one thing that stands out to me is how it's also made local cultures maybe more accessible globally, which is kind of an interesting counterpoint to the homogenization worry. It lets you show what part of the topic is most salient for you right then.
Helps guide the conversation towards your focus.
Yeah.
Okay, related. How do you show you're genuinely interested or even surprised by something someone said? A fact, maybe.
I find it fascinating that it's a really direct way. It signals you're engaged, you're curious about that specific bit of info.
Like that example about trees talking to each other. Scientists found trees communicate through roots, responding, wow, I find it fascinating that nature has these hidden complex networks. It's more than just stating the fact back.
Yeah, you're sharing your reaction to it.
It invites the other person to kind of share that wonder or maybe talk more about that specific point.
Exactly. Now, shifting gears a bit, the article also covered phrases for just introducing information or giving context.
Right, like adding a relevant detail. It's worth mentioning that. That's a good one.
Mm-hmm. If someone's talking productivity tips, like taking breaks, you could add, that's helpful. And it's worth mentioning that even just a 5-minute walk outside can really make a difference. You're adding a related piece that builds on their point.
And for helping someone get the scale of something, to put it into perspective, that feels really valuable.
Oh, absolutely. It's like saying, okay, let me give you a comparison to help you grasp this number or idea.
Yeah.
The article's example on population growth was perfect. The world population is over 8 billion now.
Right.
Responding, wow, to put that into perspective, it was only around 6 billion just 20 years ago. That phrase makes the 8 billion hit harder, gives it context.
It turns it from just a number into something you can actually sort of feel.
Okay, we talked about that's a valid point, but for polite disagreement, what are other ways to acknowledge someone's idea, maybe if you don't fully agree, but you want to show you heard them? A really useful one for acknowledging their way of thinking, even if you don't agree with the conclusion, is that's an interesting way of looking at it.
Yes. So you're validating how they got there, not necessarily the destination itself. Like maybe someone says, sometimes just ignoring a problem makes it go away. You could say, that's an interesting way of looking at it. My first thought is usually to tackle things directly, but I can see how maybe stepping back could give clarity sometimes.
Exactly. It shows you're open-minded, you're willing to consider their angle, even if you end up somewhere else. Keeps things collaborative.
Good one. Okay, what about when something is widely accepted or maybe undeniable? The article listed some phrases for flagging those.
Yeah, things like, it goes without saying that.
Right.
Or, there's no denying the fact that, maybe it's hard to dispute that. These give extra weight to a statement that's generally seen as true or strongly backed by evidence. Signals its common ground or a very solid point.
Like exercising is good for you. Adding, it goes without saying that staying active offers huge health benefits. It just reinforces that shared understanding.
Right. Or maybe something more serious. There's no denying the fact that climate change needs urgent collective action. It frames it as, well, an undeniable reality based on the consensus. Or using, it's hard to dispute that with research. It's hard to dispute that given all the research linking early reading to cognitive development.
They signal, okay, this part is pretty solid. Now, flip side, what if someone says something that feels a bit much, exaggerated? How do you gently challenge that?
The article suggested it's a bit of a stretch to say that, which I think is a wonderfully soft way to push back.
That feels very characteristically polite, doesn't it? Yeah. Understated. Like if someone declares, social media has completely destroyed all human connection.
Oh, okay.
You could respond, well, it's maybe a bit of a stretch to say that, isn't it? I mean, it also lets people connect across huge distances, form niche communities. It questions the extreme nature of it without just saying, you're wrong.
Yeah, brings it back to earth a bit without causing offense. Okay, and one last type. What if you realize you weren't clear? You need to rephrase your own point.
What I'm trying to get at is, that's perfect. Signals, hold on, let me clarify my main idea here.
Yes. If you feel you've rambled a bit, or maybe the point got lost, you can refocus with, sorry, maybe I didn't explain that well. What I'm trying to get at is that single tasking, rather than multitasking, can actually lead to better quality for complex work. You refine it.
This brings up that question the article tackled. Are these phrases the same as idioms?
Right. And the key difference is function. Idioms are those fixed phrases where the meaning isn't literal, like kick the bucket. These conversational phrases, though they can sound a bit formulaic sometimes, they're tools for managing the conversation, acknowledging, shifting topics, clarifying. Their meaning is usually much more transparent in the context of the chat.
That makes total sense. They aren't about some secret code. They're about being clear, polite, effective communicators, navigating the interaction itself.
Exactly. The article really emphasizes they make communication feel more natural, more fluent. They let you participate more confidently, more effectively, adding those layers of respect that maybe just simple sentences lack sometimes.
And it made the point that while these specific phrases are English, the job they do managing the social side of talking, that's universal, isn't it? Other languages have their own ways, shaped by their cultures.
Absolutely. It's not just about English rules. It's about this fundamental human need to connect respectfully through language.
Which leads to the practical bit. How do you actually learn them? How do you use them? The article's advice was pretty straightforward. Exposure and practice.
Listen for them. Seriously, once you start paying attention, you'll hear them everywhere. Movies, podcasts like this one, dialogues in books.
Start spotting them.
And then, consciously try using just a couple. Don't try to learn 50 at once. Pick one or two for a situation you want to handle better. Maybe acknowledging points or introducing your view more gently. Start small.
Yeah, the article definitely warned against overusing the same phrase too much. That can sound repetitive or unnatural. Variety, used at the right time, is the goal.
They're not magic spells. They're tools.
Yeah.
Use them intentionally to be clearer, more polite, and just better at engaging with others.
So wrapping this up then, what's the main takeaway for you, the listener, from this deep dive into conversational phrases?
I think it's that really getting comfortable with these types of phrases, like the ones we've talked about from the article, it fundamentally changes how effective your communication is. They give you the tools for nuance, for showing respect, for guiding the flow, connecting on a level beyond just basic facts.
Right. They're vital tools if you want to become a more articulate, maybe even more influential communicator.
They're practical skills you can actively work on. By listening, by practicing, you're building fluency not just in grammar, but in the actual art of conversation.
Mastering those subtle signals that make talking to other humans feel, well, comfortable and effective. And here's maybe a final thought for you to mull over. Building on that idea of connection, think about how these subtle language tools might reflect deeper cultural ways of thinking about communication itself. Like, why is it so common in English, for example, to have phrases that specifically acknowledge the other person's point before you add your own, even if you disagree? Like, that's a valid point, but structure.
Look, it's more than just being polite, isn't it?
Right. It shapes the whole interaction, prioritizing finding some common ground or showing validation before introducing a difference. So think about how consciously using these kinds of nuances could influence not just what you say, but actually how you build relationships and connect with people on a really human level.
Welcome to the deep dive.
Great to be here.
We're jumping right into something really practical today. Incredibly useful, actually.
Yeah. What we got?
We're doing a deep dive into a specific kind of source material. These guides designed to help learners, quickly grasp everyday English for common situations.
Ah, okay. The real practical stuff.
Exactly. Think of it like an essential toolkit for navigating conversations, understanding things around you when you need to get up to speed fast.
Right. For travel or work or just daily life.
Precisely. These resources, they're invaluable for that. They break down the language you need for specific scenarios, shopping, eating out, talking family, all that.
Makes sense.
So our mission today, unpack this approach. Pull out the useful nuggets. Figure out why this structured scenario thing works so well for learning quickly. What's the magic? Right?
No, that's a good question, because often the real challenge for learners, it isn't just memorizing lists of words, is it?
No, definitely not.
It's knowing which words, which phrases are most relevant for that specific moment, and crucially, how to actually use them, string them together in a real conversation.
Right.
So this kind of source, it gives you that practical toolkit. Ready to go? Immediate application.
Like handing you the right keys instead of the whole dictionary?
Exactly that. It's about the keys for the most common doors you need to open. Functional first.
That's a great way to put it. And these guides, they cover a surprising amount of ground. I mean, from the absolute basics, like asking how much without feeling awkward, to slightly trickier things, like knowing how to say you're feeling a bit under the weather.
Common idioms.
Yeah. Okay, Let's unpack this then. We've got a lot to cover, starting right at those basic foundational interactions.
Sounds good. Where do we start?
Let's dive into the bedrock stuff. Those fundamental transactions, basic interactions. These resources, they rightly start with scenarios you hit constantly, like shopping, eating out, totally. So for shopping, this source we looked at, it gives you the must-haves right away.
Yeah.
It doesn't try to teach you every retail term ever.
No, that'd be overwhelming.
It focuses on key phrases, like how much is this? Understanding price, knowing expensive versus cheap.
Critical stuff.
And it gives you these little dialogues, like a customer asks the price, thinks it's too much, looks for something cheaper, and then decides to buy the cheaper one. Real situation.
And what's so crucial there is the immediate use. You need those phrases just to function in a store, right? They're non-negotiable for just buying something.
Absolutely.
Then the guide builds on that, adds phrases for paying. Can I pay by credit card? Do you have a discount? Can I have a receipt, please? It's not just a word list. It's the linguistic toolkit for that whole common transaction, start to finish.
Yeah, getting those core interactions down, it's empowering. Okay, moving to restaurants. Similar approach.
Pretty much. Focuses on the words you'll use straight away. Menu, order, knowing waiter or waitress asking for the bill or check.
Describing the food delicious.
Right. And what's really fascinating here, I think, is how these sections give you not just the words, but the actual structure of a typical interaction.
How so?
Well, you see the common questions staff might ask, like, are you ready to order or anything else? And then the expected ways you respond. It teaches the flow.
Ah, right. Like the rhythm of the conversation.
Exactly. It directly tackles that problem of not just knowing words, but knowing how to use them in that back and forth. It's like getting mini conversation scripts, templates almost.
Templates you can adapt. Yeah, I like that. Learning the dance, not just the steps.
That's it.
Okay, so that insight into the structure, that's key.
Yeah.
Now, let's shift gears a bit. What about language for connecting with people? More personal stuff.
Important too.
The source material hits things like family, daily routine, and emotions.
The building blocks of relationships, really.
For family, okay, the words themselves, mother, father, sister, brother, they might seem basic. But the value is seeing them in context. The guide shows simple dialogues, like how you'd ask someone, do you have any brothers or sisters? Or talk about being close to your family.
Using the words to actually initiate that personal connection.
Exactly.
And if you think bigger picture, mastering these topics is just crucial for building relationships beyond just buying things or ordering food.
Sure.
Talking about your family, sharing bits of your daily routine, what time do you wake up, or expressing feelings, how are you feeling today? These are standard ways people connect, build rapport, learn about each other.
Right. Without that language, you're kind of stuck at the functional level.
Precisely. This guide gives you language not just for needs, but for, well, social bonding.
That's a really important distinction. Functional versus rapport building. Okay, let's explore how these guides then help with navigating the wider world. Practical stuff, maybe unexpected situations too.
Like getting around problems.
Yeah. The source looks at travel, including airports, which is huge, emergencies, getting directions, using technology, phone calls.
All vital.
So for travel, it gives you essentials. Hotel, ticket, plane, passport. Phrases for talking about your trip or vacation. Then the airport section adds layers, right? Boarding pass, gate, security, flight, stuff you absolutely need there.
Can't get on the plane without knowing some of that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the emergency section, I mean, this is particularly valuable. It focuses on truly critical language.
High stakes.
Totally. Drills down on words like help, emergency, police, ambulance. Emphasizes knowing how to call 911 or the local number.
Crucial difference.
It even gives dialogue simulating a call for help, reporting a fire, giving a location, and adds advice like stay calm. This isn't just chat, it's language for when things go wrong.
Which raises an interesting point, doesn't it, about the psychology of learning this stuff for practical use.
How so?
By giving these specific targeted phrases for those crucial moments, asking for help, finding your way with directions like turn left, go straight, using essential tech like phone, internet. The source basically acts like a lifeline. It offers immediate utility. It can significantly reduce that feeling of panic or frustration in unfamiliar, maybe stressful situations.
Like a safety net.
Exactly. It's providing the language you need when you really need it.
A linguistic safety net. I like that. Okay, and here's where it gets really interesting for me.
Oh, yeah.
This guide doesn't just stick to the bare bones. It starts throwing in colorful language, idioms, across different sections.
Ah, the fun stuff makes it sound more natural.
Totally. And they add so much flavor, and insight into how people actually talk. Like talking about money, you learn cost an arm and a leg.
Meaning very expensive. That car cost an arm and a leg. Classic.
Right. Or money doesn't grow on trees. A reminder, money's limited.
Good old parental wisdom, that one.
Huh. Yeah. And what's fascinating, as you said, is how these idioms give you insight into the culture, not just vocabulary. They make the language sound more fluent.
Definitely. Think about feelings on cloud nine for really happy.
Or down in the dumps if you're sad.
Yeah, they paint a much more vivid picture than just saying happy or sad. It's more nuanced.
And they pop up everywhere in these guides.
Yeah.
Like under the weather, for feeling sick. It's such a common, gentle way to say it.
Or work-related ones like on the ball, meaning you're quick, efficient.
Even travel has them. Hit the road to start a journey. Off the beaten path for somewhere unusual.
Yeah, and seeing them integrated into different scenarios in the guide helps you see how versatile they are. Like, bring home the bacon, earning money. That might show up talking about work or groceries or even just family roles.
Right.
And sometimes their placement in the source material is interesting. Like finding steal someone's thunder listed under weather forecast.
Wait, really?
Yeah, it shows how language connects ideas in sometimes, unexpected ways. Which is actually a key part of getting truly fluent, seeing those connections.
That makes perfect sense. Understanding these, eventually, trying to use them, it takes you beyond just being understood. You start sounding more natural, understanding the nuances as a whole new layer.
A layer of depth, yeah.
And this resource, it doesn't stop with just those core areas. It touches on loads of other corners of everyday life. Shows the real breadth of everyday.
Like what else?
Brief sections on basic banking terms, account, deposit, withdraw, navigating the post office letter, package, stamp.
Okay, errands.
Yeah. Grocery store produce, dairy, sale, going to the gym, exercise, treadmill, weights, cinema popcorn, showtime, school stuff, subject, homework, even celebrations, party, gift, holiday.
Wow, okay, so it's quite comprehensive.
It really is.
And that scope is powerful, isn't it?
It shows the learner that every day isn't just 5 basic topics. It includes leisure, errands, public services, social events, the works.
Right.
And each section presumably continues that pattern.
Yeah.
Specific vocabulary, dialogue examples.
Exactly, reinforcing that structured, practical approach across all these different scenarios.
Got it. So, bringing this all back to you, the learner.
Sure.
It seems really clear how this structured approach works.
Yeah.
Breaking language down by topic, by scenario, it gives you a clear path. Manageable?
Less overwhelming.
Definitely. It tackles that fear of info overload by giving you these digestible chunks you can actually use right away.
And by focusing on those practical phrases, those common situations, you get those little aha moments.
Yeah.
When you realize, hey, I can actually use this today. The dialogues are like mini simulations. Practice runs in your head.
Builds confidence before you're even in the situation.
Absolutely. It increases confidence.
So, yeah, this deep dive really shows how this kind of resource acts like a powerful map or a really practical toolkit for navigating everyday English.
Well put.
So as we wrap up here, the value we get from exploring a learning resource designed like this seems, profound, actually.
How so?
You gain practical vocabulary, right? Tailored to common situations. You get essential phrases that just smooth out interactions. You understand the typical flow of conversation.
The structure we talked about?
Yeah. And you learn how to add color, sound more natural by using some of those idioms.
And I just reiterate that point. Effective communication in everyday life, it really boils down to having the right words and voices ready for the right situation.
Preparedness.
Exactly. This kind of source material provides that foundation. It makes those potentially daunting situations feel much more manageable, lets you participate more freely.
So here's a final thought for you to consider. How does having just a simple, ready set of key phrases for shopping, health, making plans, even handling a small problem, how does that not just help you speak the words, but fundamentally change how easily you can participate, how you connect, how you just navigate the world around you?
It lowers the barrier to entry for everything.
Right. This deep dive, I think, shows that sometimes the biggest impact on your ability to really engage with life starts with mastering the simplest, most functional, situation-specific language.
Simple but powerful.
Exactly. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive.
My pleasure.
Okay, let's unpack this then. Today, we're diving deep into something really practical, I think. It's about navigating conversations in English, with more confidence, more smoothly.
Exactly. Like getting a set of expert tools for your linguistic toolbox.
Yeah, toolbox. I like that. And our blueprint for this deep dive is an article called 50 Plus Advanced English Phrases, so keep talking smoothly.
That's the one. And it really lays out, over 50 phrases, covers quite a bit.
It does. Everything from, just asking what someone thinks to those moments where you kind of need to interrupt, but politely.
Right. Or even how to handle maybe more sensitive topics without causing a conversational crash.
So our mission here is to explore these phrases, understand why they work, figure out when you'd actually use them.
And ultimately, how they can help you sound more natural, feel more in control when you're speaking English.
Get ready, because this deep dive is kind of a shortcut, isn't it? These aren't your typical beginner phrases.
Not really. They're more the workhorses of native conversation, the ones that manage the act of talking, not just the subject itself. It's about that subtle control.
Okay, so the article kicks off with this core idea of conversation tools. Why isn't it enough just to know the words for the topic we're discussing?
Well, what's interesting is that conversations, they're rarely just a straight line, are they?
No, definitely not.
They're dynamic. They shift based on who you're talking to, the situation, even, how interested you are.
Right.
So just knowing the topic words isn't the full picture. You constantly need ways to manage the interaction, asking questions, responding, maybe changing direction.
So these phrases are the tools for that management bit, the how of the chat, not just the what.
Precisely. And the article handily breaks them down into categories. Let's start with a really fundamental one. Asking for opinions. Keeps it from being just a monologue.
Seems obvious,
Yep.
but I guess there are nuances, different ways depending on who you're talking to.
Absolutely. The source starts simple, stuff you probably know, like, do you agree, or what do you think about that?
Okay, standard stuff.
But then it moves into slightly, let's say, softer or more formal territory.
Like what?
Well, phrases like, what's your opinion? Or maybe, how do you feel about it? Then a touch more polite, perhaps, I'd like to hear your thoughts on that.
Or, I'm interested to hear your opinion about this.
Yeah, I can see that. And you mentioned one. The article highlights a really formal one. Good for work meetings, perhaps.
Yes, would you like to add anything? It feels very structured, very polite, like a clear invitation.
It is. It signals you value their input. Think of asking for opinions like opening a door, inviting participation. Makes the whole thing feel more balanced, more engaging.
That makes total sense. Okay, so you've opened the floor, but what about when you need to chime in? Polite interruption. It feels like a minefield sometimes.
It really can feel that way. Nobody wants to be rude. But, sometimes you have a key point or maybe time is limited. The article acknowledges this. There are polite ways you can and sometimes must interrupt.
So simple apologies are key first.
Right. Starting with just sorry, or excuse me. The article notes, often comes across as a little more polite.
Okay.
And often that quick apology is enough to just slide your point in. Like the example they give, sorry, I thought our meeting was on Tuesday next week, not Friday. Quick, direct.
Got it. Apology, then point. Simple enough. What if you just want to add an idea, not correct someone?
Then the article gives some nice informal options like, do you mind if I add to that? Or the very common one, can I jump in here?
Jump in. I like that visual.
Yeah, and the source clarifies, it just means joining the conversation flow.
Okay. And for slightly more formal apologies before sharing.
You might use, sorry to interrupt, but I got something to say. Or, sorry for interrupting.
Is there a difference there? The article seemed to hint at one.
Yeah, a subtle one, sorry to interrupt, is often more direct, like you're pausing the specific person speaking to you.
Right.
Sorry for interrupting. Might be used more when you're entering a conversation that's already going, like stepping into a group chat or joining a meeting late and needing to add something.
That's a useful distinction. And if you need to be super formal, like hotel front desk level formal,
then you pull out the may I phrases. Sorry, may I interrupt you for just a moment? Or if I may interrupt you for a minute, I'd like to share something with you. Adds that clear layer of deference,
Definitely. Okay, that's a good range for interrupting politely. What about when the conversation just wanders off completely? You need tools to pull it back.
Oh, this happens all the time. You start talking about work, suddenly you're on to weekend plans. The article gives us some classics for gently steering back.
Like key.
Things like, so anyway, getting back to my story. or as I was saying. Or that one when you've completely lost your train of thought. Where was it? Yes.
And you can combine them, right?
Yeah.
Makes it sound really natural.
Totally. The example is spot on. So anyway, where were we? Yes, see, we're talking about. It's a neat little tool to regain control of the conversation's direction.
Now, this next category feels super useful, especially maybe for learners. Double-checking understanding.
Oh, this is so important. For confidence, for accuracy, especially if you're about to answer a question or agree to something.
Right, prevents mix-ups.
Exactly. And using these phrases actually shows you're engaged. Native speakers do it constantly. Doesn't mean you haven't understood. It just means you're being careful. Good communication, basically.
So you're basically saying back what you think you heard. Paraphrasing.
That's it. Phrases like, so what you're asking is, So what you want to know is, or the simple, do you mean?
Okay.
A really common one is, in other words, what you're saying is, These just make sure everyone's on the same page before you move on.
And again, formal versions for professional settings, client calls, customer service.
Yeah, the article points to using the verb confirm. That adds the formality. I'd like to confirm what you said. Or, excuse me, can I just confirm what you said? Adds precision, professionalism.
Right, confirming details is vital there. Okay, let's switch gears a bit. Expressing agreement and disagreement. Core functions.
Absolutely core. The source shows there's a whole spectrum, starting with simple agreement like, yes, absolutely.
And then ramping it up for stronger agreement.
You can say, I completely agree with you, or I couldn't agree more.
That's a strong one.
It is. Or even amp it up further. I couldn't possibly agree more. And for real emphasis, I really strongly agree with you. Using these different levels adds nuance, shows how much you agree.
Okay, but often it's not black and white.
Yeah.
You might only agree partially. How do you handle that delicately?
Right. The goal here is to acknowledge their point first, then gently introduce your different view. These phrases often validate what was said before using but or however to pivot.
Things like, I see what you mean, but.
Exactly. Or, I understand your point of view, but, oh, I can see where you're coming from, but.
Makes sense. Acknowledging first.
Another good one is, I agree with you up to a point, however. These are great because they show you've listened, you've processed their idea before offering yours. Makes it feel less like a battle, more like exploring ideas together.
Okay, but what if you just completely disagree?
Then the article provides more direct but still polite options. I don't feel the same way, or actually I don't quite agree, or simply, I disagree.
And the one using I'm afraid. That's interesting.
Yes. I'm afraid I don't agree with you on that or about that. This is a classic example of English using softeners. As the source points out, I'm afraid isn't about being scared.
Yeah.
No, it's just a polite buffer before delivering something potentially unwelcome, like disagreement.
That little phrase does a lot of work, and for really formal disagreement, like in a very serious meeting.
The tool the article suggests is adding a word like respectfully. Respectfully, I have to disagree.
Clear, but polite. Signals respect for the person, even if not the point.
Precisely.
Fantastic tools for agreement navigation. Okay, what about you finish a topic, you want to bring up something new, changing the subject?
Yeah, a smooth transition helps when the current topic's kind of fizzled out, or you suddenly remember something else important. Some phrases link back slightly.
Like, that reminds me.
Exactly, or speaking about that, or speaking of that, they create a bridge.
And if it's totally unrelated, something completely different.
Then you signal the shift more obviously. Oh, by the way, did I tell you about this? Oh, while I remember, or before I forget, I've got something I want to say.
And there are even more direct ways, right? Just acknowledging the jump.
Yes, like this has nothing to do with what we're talking about, but I've got to share it anyway. Or I know this is completely changing the topic, but I've got to tell you. These work because you're signposting the change, managing expectations.
Now, this next part feels quite advanced.
Yeah.
Talking about controversial topics. The article doesn't say avoid them.
No, and that's a really key point from the source. Topics like politics, religion, social issues, they can definitely spark disagreement. But silence isn't the only option. The phrases here are tools to introduce your view in a way that hopefully keeps the conversation open and respectful, even with differing opinions.
So they kind of prepare the listener. Signal that this might be something not everyone agrees on.
Exactly. Phrases like, I know not everyone agrees with me, but this is what I think. Or, I know this is a contentious issue.
Or, it might be an unpopular opinion, but I strongly believe.
Yeah.
Those set the stage.
Yeah. And there are ones that explicitly state the desire for discussion despite differences. Like, I don't see eye to eye with everyone on this matter, but I think it's really important to discuss this.
Okay.
Or this one's excellent. Whilst you may not agree with my views, I'm definitely interested in hearing yours. That really sets a tone for open dialogue.
That's powerful. And the source threw in a fun idiom here, too.
Yes. I'm not trying to ruffle anyone's feathers here.
What does that mean exactly?
It basically means, hey, I don't want to upset or anger anyone. I'm just sharing a different perspective. It signals you're treading carefully into potentially sensitive territory.
Ruffle feathers.
Yeah.
That's a great idiom. It really shows how these tools manage the feeling of the conversation. Okay, so after all that navigating,
Yeah.
how do you politely get out of the conversation?
Knowing how to make a graceful exit is just as vital. The article gives some simple, polite options for this.
Like, well, I'd best be off. It's been great chatting.
Perfect. Or maybe just, anyway, I'd better get back to it. if you're at work, perhaps.
And a warmer one if you know the person.
Yeah, something like, I'm so glad I ran into you. It's been great catching up. I'll see you soon. Having these ready avoids that awkward, lingering,
Definitely. So summing up, what are the big takeaways from the source about all these phrases?
Well, the main thing is these aren't just theoretical lists. They're phrases real native English speakers use constantly every day to manage conversations. And the source really recommends listening out for them, in movies, podcasts, real life, to hear how they sound in context.
And the practical advice, don't try to learn all 50 at once.
Please don't. That'd be totally overwhelming. The advice is smart. Pick just a couple from each category that seem useful or interesting to you.
Focus on those first.
Exactly. Practice those specific ones. Try using them. That focused approach helps them become natural over time.
This deep dive really highlights how these phrases are more than just words. They're essential tools for the process of conversation. They can genuinely boost confidence and fluency.
Absolutely. The source makes a convincing case that fluency isn't just grammar and vocab. It's also having the skill to manage the flow, the shifts, the dynamics of interacting with people in English.
Which leaves us with a thought.
Yeah.
I mean, think about how having these specific tools, knowing how to smoothly ask, interrupt, disagree, change topic, might change things for you. Not just what you say, but how you actually feel when you're speaking English.
Especially when you hit those potentially tricky moments.
Yeah. Think about the sense of agency, the control these seemingly simple phrases can give you. Something to consider. All right, let's jump right in. Today's deep dive, language learning. We're following Ava's journey to English fluency. And get this, we have her actual podcast to guide us. It's amazing. We hear everything, all the ups and downs, like a real behind-the-scenes look. She goes from beginner to fluent in just 2 years.
Yeah, it's like having a front row seat to her progress, not just the final polished result, but the real, sometimes messy journey. That's where the real learning is, right?
Totally. And speaking of messy, her podcast starts right when she arrives in London. University lectures, trying to order coffee, talk about a baptism by fire. I mean, even watching Friends was a challenge at first. Can you imagine being surrounded by English 24/7 as a beginner?
Total sensory overload, right? Think about it. Even in our native languages, we don't catch every single word. Now imagine doing that in a language you're still learning while also trying to learn vocabulary and grammar. No wonder she felt overwhelmed at first.
There's this one scene in her podcast. She's in her first university lecture. The professor's talking about fundamental principles, and she's just like, fundamental what now?
Yeah.
I think we've all been there at some point in our learning journey.
Oh, absolutely. That feeling of being lost, wanting to give up, it's a common hurdle. But, and this is what I find so inspiring about Ava, she didn't quit. She came up with this clever strategy, immersion through listening, but with a twist.
Okay, now I'm really curious. What was the twist?
Well, instead of jumping into really complex stuff, she started with podcasts on everyday topics. The key. She listened at a slower speed at first. Then, as she got comfortable, she gradually increased the speed.
Brilliant. Easing yourself in instead of diving head first. Did she mention what types of podcasts worked best?
Yeah, she was into conversational podcasts, like people just chatting about daily life or news. She said it helped her get used to the rhythm and flow of natural speech, way different from that formal, structured language you find in textbooks.
That makes sense. It's how people actually talk, not that perfect grammar you see in books. Did she use any other methods for listening?
Oh, yeah. audiobooks, but she always had the physical book too, so she could follow along. A great way to connect the spoken and written word. Plus, she rewatched familiar shows like Friends with subtitles. The goal was to pick up common phrases and get used to the natural speed.
So it's not just about quantity, it's quality and strategy. What surprised you most about how Ava approached this listening phase?
Honestly, her patience, the way she gradually increased the difficulty. She didn't expect to understand everything immediately. She understood that progress takes time and was willing to put in the work. It's a great reminder that language learning is a marathon, not a sprint.
Absolutely. So we've tackled the listening hurdle, but what about speaking? That's often the scariest part for language learners. Coming up next, we'll dive into how Ava went from being terrified to order coffee to competently chatting with locals. Buckle up, it's a wild ride.
You know, if listening was a hurdle, speaking was like climbing a mountain for Ava. That feeling, like having to build sentences on the spot, pronunciation worries, that inner voice saying, what if I mess up? It's enough to make you just want to stay silent.
Oh, tell me about it. And Ava's podcast really captures that anxiety. She actually shares this recording of herself trying to order a coffee.
Yeah.
She wants a large, but all that comes out is, I want big coffee.
It's kind of painful, but so relatable. I've totally been there in my own language learning.
It happens to everyone, that fear of speaking, making mistakes, sounding silly, it can be paralyzing. But here's the thing about Ava. Instead of letting fear win, she tackled it head on.
That's brave. How'd she conquer this speaking mountain? Did she have a plan?
She did. A multi-pronged approach, starting with the basics, practicing phrases and pronunciation alone, in front of a mirror, low pressure, Then, conversation groups with other English learners. It's a safe space to practice, everyone's in the same boat, no need to be perfect. That's a great idea. A supportive environment, making mistakes, learning together.
Did she mention what was helpful about those groups specifically?
She said they helped her overcome that initial fear of speaking. She realized everyone makes mistakes. It's okay to laugh at yourself sometimes. It's all part of the process. But she didn't stop there. She knew she had to push further, so she started talking to locals, even if it meant stumbling through sentences or repeating herself.
Wow, that takes guts. Putting herself out there, knowing she might make mistakes with native speakers. Does she have any strategies for when she felt lost for words?
Oh yeah, Ava always had this little notebook with key phrases for different situations, and she wasn't afraid to ask people to repeat or speak slower. Resourcefulness, not letting awkwardness stop her.
Such a good tip. It's easy to feel embarrassed, but most people are patient when you're making an effort. But she didn't just rely on random conversations, did she? Nope. Ava took a speaking course focused on role-playing everyday situations, ordering food, asking directions, small talk, all those things that can be nerve-wracking. She said it was super helpful to practice in a structured environment, get feedback from a teacher and other students.
It's like she was systematically building up her speaking muscle, targeting different communication skills. Did the podcast mention how she felt about all this speaking practice? Did the fear ever go away?
It's amazing. Over time, the fear just kind of faded. The more she spoke, the more confident she became. She realized people were patient and mistakes were just part of learning. That mindset shift is crucial for anyone learning a new language.
It sounds like she embraced progress over perfection. Not about sounding native overnight, but constantly challenging yourself, getting out of your comfort zone. It's so inspiring.
It is. And speaking of pushing boundaries, Ava's journey takes another turn with reading. From children's books to complex academic texts, she finds a way to not just understand, but enjoy reading in English. We'll dig into that fascinating part after a quick... You know what? No break. Let's keep going.
All right, diving right back in. We're on Ava's language learning journey, and now it's all about reading. What's fascinating is she goes from overwhelmed by academic jargon to actually enjoying reading in English. That's quite a change.
It is, and it shows how those language skills, they kind of build on each other. Remember how she nailed listening first? That really set her up for success with reading.
Right. That scene in the library comes to mind. She's staring at her textbook, totally lost, all that comprehensive analysis. And technical terms, it's like hitting a vocab wall. I can almost feel that panic. Did she say how she got past that feeling?
She did. And it's a strategy that could help a lot of learners. It's called a graded approach. Instead of forcing herself to understand those tough academic texts right away, she started simpler, like children's books, graded readers, those books made for language learners. Clear language, familiar themes, anything approachable.
That's smart, like building up your reading stamina, starting small before a marathon. Did she mention any specific books or authors she liked early on?
Not specific titles, but she did say children's books were surprisingly helpful. Simple language, engaging stories, often with pictures to help you understand. She also liked graphic novels. The visuals and text together made it easier to follow.
Great tip. It's all about finding stuff you actually enjoy reading, makes learning more fun. So as she got more confident, did she move on to harder stuff?
Absolutely. Gradually, she increased the difficulty, moving to news articles, then short stories, and finally, yes, even those tough textbooks. But here's the thing. She didn't just passively read. She actively engaged with the text, using different strategies to understand better.
Okay, I'm intrigued. What did actively engaging look like for Ava? Any specific techniques?
Definitely. Ava loved using dictionaries, not just for the meaning of words, but for those little nuances, how they're used in different contexts. She also kept a vocabulary journal, writing down new words, even drawing pictures to help her remember.
That's clever, making those unfamiliar words more tangible and memorable, like creating your own personalized dictionary tailored to your learning journey.
Exactly. And another trick, reading aloud. It helped with pronunciation, of course, but also made her slow down, absorb each sentence. Great way to internalize the rhythm of the language.
It's like training your brain to process the language on all levels, visually, orally, even kinesthetically. Did she talk about how she felt when she started using these active reading strategies?
She said it made a huge difference. At first, it felt unnatural, slow, but over time it became automatic, and she remembered more, enjoyed reading more. It's a good reminder, sometimes slowing down actually speeds up your learning in the long run.
So true. It's about finding what works for you and being patient. So listening, speaking, reading. We can't forget writing. Grammar struggles, finding the right words. Writing can be tough for language learners. Ready to unpack Ava's writing journey?
Absolutely. Writing is often seen as the hardest skill, right?
Wow.
You need good vocabulary, grammar, but also style, tone, organization. And Ava's podcast gives us this raw look at her first essay draft in English. Short sentences, grammar errors, lack of flow, it's all there, something many learners can relate to.
Oh, I know I can. I remember those early days writing in another language. It feels like you're trying to express yourself with one hand tied behind your back. Did Ava share how she tackled those early writing challenges?
She did. It's simple but effective. She started a daily journal. Not about perfect grammar or fancy writing, just getting comfortable expressing herself, even if it was just a few sentences at first.
Great starting point. Takes the pressure off, lets you focus on getting your thoughts down. Did she mention how she dealt with those grammar gremlins we all face in a new language?
Oh, yeah. Ava embraced technology. She became a pro at using grammar checking tools to find her common errors and learn from them. But the key is, she didn't just blindly accept the corrections. She took time to understand the why. She'd look up grammar rules, do practice exercises, really trying to learn the correct way.
That's smart. Not just fixing the mistake, but understanding it to avoid it next time. But she didn't just rely on grammar checkers, right?
Nope. Ava knew feedback from others was important. She'd ask teachers, classmates, even friends to read her writing, give suggestions. It's a great way to get a fresh perspective, find areas to improve.
Like having an extra set of eyes to catch what you might miss. Did she mention any specific feedback that was especially helpful?
She did. Ava found feedback on the overall structure and organization super helpful. She realized she wrote in short, choppy sentences, and her ideas weren't always in a logical order, so she started focusing on topic sentences, transitions, the flow of her writing. She even mentioned mastering connectors, words like however, therefore, in contrast, to make her writing smoother and more sophisticated.
Those little connecting words make such a difference. So by the end of her 2 years, had she overcome those writing hurdles?
She had. Ava was writing well-structured essays, expressing herself clearly and confidently. She even gave a presentation in English, showing off her fluency to her classmates and professors. Just goes to show, consistent effort, targeted practice, and embracing mistakes really pays off.
Ava's story is truly inspiring. She went from lost and overwhelmed to owning the English language in just 2 years. It's a powerful reminder that fluency isn't about being perfect, but about communicating effectively, expressing yourself.
Totally agree. Ava's journey shows fluency as a process, not a destination. It's taking small steps every day, embracing those stumbles, finding joy in learning. It's a journey anyone can take, no matter where they start.
So for our listeners on their own language learning adventures, what's the key takeaway from Ava's experience?
If we boil down all of Ava's wisdom into one question, it's this. What's one small thing you can do today to use more English? Could be listening to a podcast, reading an article, or even just thinking about your day in English. Every step counts.
That's a great question to think about as we wrap up our deep dive. So to everyone listening, remember Ava's story. Embrace the challenge, celebrate those wins, and never stop exploring language learning. Until next time, keep those ears tuned in, those tongues practicing, and those minds open to new possibilities. Okay, so learning English all on your own, it's pretty awesome that you're taking that on, but
Yeah.
I totally get it. Sometimes it feels like you're just drowning in a notion of like vocabulary and all the grammar rules and idioms and all that stuff.
Absolutely. That feeling of just being completely overwhelmed, I think, is something that most language learners face, no matter what language you're tackling.
Right.
And that's why I think this is perfect, this deep dive that we're doing into the source material that you shared with us, which was an episode called The Best Roadmap for Self-Study English, a Beginner's Guide. And it's really packed with advice. It's a true roadmap to fluency. It covers listening, speaking, reading, writing.
Yeah, and what's so cool is it's not just like the usual, vague tips.
Right.
There are some really specific exercises and like twists on classic advice that I thought were really interesting. So we're going to unpack those.
Yeah, let's get into it.
It kicks off with listening, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And the podcast host really hammers home that listening is the foundation, but not just to understand, but to really soak up how English sounds naturally.
Yeah, and they talk about, listening to slow and clear English, especially for beginners.
Right.
And they actually suggest some podcasts specifically made for learners, like BBC Learning English and ESL Pod.
Yeah, those are classics.
It's funny, I never even thought about like how many resources are out there just for people learning English,
Right.
This deep dive is already
It's amazing.
opening my eyes.
It is. And what's great is you can literally start listening to those today. Right now.
Yeah.
But then they get even more specific.
Oh, they do?
They suggest audiobooks paired with the actual text.
Oh?
So you're hearing the pronunciation.
Oh, wow.
But you're also seeing how the words are spelled.
Okay.
So it's like a double whammy for vocabulary building.
That's clever.
Yeah.
Okay, I love this next exercise. It's so simple, but it's brilliant. They suggest listening to a 5-minute clip, picking out 5 new words, and trying to guess their meaning from context.
Great.
It's like a little detective game, but for language.
Yeah. And it forces you to really pay attention, wouldn't you say?
Right.
Like if you're just passively listening,
Yeah.
the words kind of wash over you.
Right.
But having to actively pick out and decipher these new words keeps you engaged.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally makes sense.
Yeah.
Then they move on to watching videos with subtitles.
Yes.
It's like training wheels for your ears.
Absolutely. It's a fantastic stepping stone, especially if you're coming from a language with very different sounds and rhythms.
Right.
I used a similar approach when I was learning German, and it helped me immensely.
Yeah.
They recommend shows like Friends, which makes sense. It's fun. The language is very everyday.
Right. Yeah.
But Peppa Pig, I wouldn't have thought of that.
Yeah.
But the simplicity is perfect.
It's like going back to basics, right? And again, something you can do even if you only have a few minutes.
Exactly.
They then suggest trying to repeat lines from movies, which is a fun way to practice pronunciation.
It's a fantastic idea. I mean, who hasn't tried to imitate their favorite movie characters at some point, right?
Right.
And the podcast points out that you're more likely to stick with it if the content is enjoyable.
Of course. Yeah. Pick something you like. Don't, force yourself to watch documentaries if that's not your thing.
Right. Exactly.
But then they bring up this technique called shadowing.
Yeah.
Which I have to admit I'm not familiar with. Can you kind of explain what that is?
Sure. Shadowing is basically mimicking a native speaker as closely as possible. Like you're their shadow.
Okay.
You're copying their intonation, their rhythm, their pronunciation.
Okay.
It can feel a little awkward at first, but it's incredibly effective for developing a more natural sounding accent.
So it's not just about understanding what they're saying, but how they're saying it.
Exactly.
Okay, that's fascinating.
Yeah.
They even mentioned a YouTube channel, Rachel's English,
Oh, yeah.
specifically for pronunciation.
Oh, that's a great one.
So you can literally start practicing this today,
Right now.
Yeah, and I thought it was really interesting how this section kind of wrapped up.
Okay.
They really emphasize creating a daily habit, even if it's just for 10 or 15 minutes.
Yeah.
It's like building a muscle, but for your ears and your brain.
It is. And consistent exposure is key. Just like when you were a kid absorbing your first language.
Right. Yeah. It's about those small, consistent actions over time.
Absolutely.
This is so inspiring. I'm already feeling motivated to revamp my own English practice.
I love it.
Speaking of practice, the podcast then jumps into the speaking section,
Yeah,
which I think for a lot of learners can feel like the scariest part.
definitely can be, but the podcast offers some really practical tips for overcoming that fear and building fluency. And one that I found particularly interesting is talking to yourself in English.
Wait, they suggest actually like talking to yourself.
And-
I mean, I talk to myself all the time,
Of course.
but usually in my own language.
Yeah, well, it might sound a little silly at first, but think about it this way. It's like a safe space to practice speaking without judgment.
Yeah.
You're not worried about making mistakes in front of anyone else.
Right.
And they even give this simple example. Instead of thinking, I want coffee,
Yeah.
say it out loud, I'm going to make a cup of coffee. It seems small,
Yeah.
but it gets you used to vocalizing your thoughts in English.
It's like you're taking those thoughts that are trapped in your head
Yes.
and giving them a voice, literally.
Exactly.
I love it.
Yeah.
They then suggest describing your surroundings in English, which, again, you can do anywhere, anytime. Yeah.
Exactly. And it's brilliant for expanding your vocabulary.
Okay.
Let's say you're walking through a park.
Yeah.
Instead of just thinking, oh, there's a tree,
Right.
you might describe it as a tall, leafy oak tree with branches reaching towards the sky.
Wow, that's beautiful.
Right. It challenges you to use more descriptive language
Wow.
and think about those nuances of English.
That's a good point. And while practicing solo is great,
Yeah.
they also emphasize the value of having a speaking partner.
Absolutely. Having someone to practice with can make the whole process less intimidating.
Right.
And they mention some really useful tools for finding language partners.
Yeah, they recommend apps like Hello Talk and Tandem,
Yeah, I've heard of those.
which connect you with native speakers.
I'm all over the world.
Yeah, that's cool.
And they also suggest looking for local language exchange groups,
Okay.
which is a nice option for those who prefer face-to-face interaction.
Right.
So it's great that they provide options for different learning styles
Exact-
and preferences.
Okay, this next challenge I thought was really intriguing.
Okay.
They propose speaking for 1 minute straight on a given topic.
Oh, wow.
Like preparing for, those elevator pitch moments
Yeah.
where you need to be,
Concise, confident.
yeah,
I
exactly.
love that analogy.
It really is about training yourself to
Express your thoughts clearly
yeah.
and concisely, which is a valuable skill beyond language learning.
Oh, for sure, yeah.
It really is.
And, good practice for real life situations where you might not have a lot of time to explain yourself.
Right.
But they also stress the importance of recording yourself speaking,
Yes.
which, I don't know, can be a little daunting, even though I know it's helpful.
I understand the hesitation. It can be a little cringeworthy to listen back to your own voice,
Yes.
especially when you're still learning.
Right.
But remember, the goal isn't to sound perfect. It's about developing self-awareness.
Right. It's about noticing those little things that you might not realize you're doing, like a certain pronunciation mistake or something
Exactly.
that you keep making.
Yeah,
And they emphasize that it's all about progress, not perfection.
absolutely. And sometimes it's good to have a little reminder that even native speakers make mistakes.
Yeah.
We're all human.
Oh, totally. All the time.
So don't be afraid to stumble and experiment.
Okay, now I'm really feeling motivated to put these speaking tips into practice.
too.
But before we get too carried away,
Okay.
the podcast then moves on to reading, right?
Yes, reading is like a superpower for building vocabulary and deepening your understanding of English grammar.
It's like you're absorbing the building blocks of the language, wouldn't you say?
I love that analogy. It's so true. And they emphasize the importance of starting with simple texts,
Okay.
like children's books or graded readers.
Oh?
And they even mention the BBC Learning English website again,
Oh,
which seems to be a recurring theme
it is.
and a great resource.
I'm making a note of that now for those who might not be familiar.
Yeah.
Can you explain what graded readers are exactly?
Sure. Graded readers are books specifically written for language learners.
Okay.
They come in different levels, so you can start with simpler texts and gradually work your way up
Oh, okay.
to more complex ones as your reading skills improve.
So it's like a bridge between children's books and, say, classic literature.
Exactly.
That's really helpful.
Yeah.
And what I love about this section is the focus on active reading. They suggest an exercise where you read a short story and underline any new words you encounter.
I like that.
It's simple, but it forces you to engage with the text differently.
Yeah, it's not just about passively taking in the words,
Right.
but actively seeking out new vocabulary and trying to understand its meaning within the context of the story.
Right.
And speaking of context,
Yeah.
They really hammer home the importance of using context clues to decipher meaning,
Oh my gosh, yes.
rather than relying solely on a dictionary.
I can't tell you how many times I've gotten lost in a dictionary black hole, looking up one word after another,
We've all been there.
and completely losing track of what I was originally reading.
Yeah, it happens. And they give a great example to illustrate this.
Okay.
The power of context clues.
Huh?
They use a simple sentence. The puppy wagged its tail happily.
Okay.
You don't need a dictionary to figure out that wagged probably means moved in this context.
It's like a light bulb moment when you realize you can figure out the meaning of a word without having to constantly interrupt your flow.
Exactly. And that's such a valuable skill, especially as you start tackling more complex texts.
Right.
Right.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
They then suggest another interesting exercise, reading a paragraph every day
Yeah.
and summarizing it in one sentence,
Oh, that's good.
which, sounds like a great way to improve reading comprehension
Definitely.
and the ability to extract key information.
Yeah, it's almost like you're training your brain to be more efficient and focused,
Right.
which is so crucial in today's world,
Yes.
where we're constantly bombarded with information from all sides.
But tell me about it.
Right.
Okay, I have to admit, I'm a little skeptical about reading aloud.
Okay.
It feels a little awkward
Uh-huh.
and honestly kind of childish.
I understand the hesitation. It's not something we typically do as adults, but there are real benefits to it. Reading aloud forces you to slow down, pronounce each word carefully, and really internalize the sounds of the language.
Okay.
It strengthens the connection between your reading and speaking skills.
So it's like you're training your mouth to say the words correctly,
Exactly.
even if you're not speaking to another person.
Yeah.
Okay.
And they even suggest recording yourself reading a news article,
Okay.
which seems a little less intimidating than, say, reading Shakespeare aloud.
That's a good point. News articles are something that we encounter regularly.
Right.
And the language is generally more straightforward. But
Yeah.
like with all these other tips,
Uh-huh.
the key is consistency.
Right. Absolutely. Even just 15 minutes of reading each day can make a significant difference over time.
Yeah.
It's about making it a habit, like brushing your teeth
Okay.
or going for a walk.
So it's about integrating these little pockets of learning into your daily routine,
Exactly. Yeah.
which is so much less daunting than trying to block out like hours for studying.
It is. It is.
Exactly. And speaking of integrating learning into your everyday life,
Yeah.
the podcast then moves on to writing,
Oh, the big one.
which can feel like the most intimidating skill to master.
It can be.
Yeah, writing always feels like this big, scary monster.
But they reassure us that the goal isn't to become the next Shakespeare.
Okay, good.
It's about getting comfortable expressing your thoughts and ideas in written English,
Right.
focusing on clarity and accuracy
Okay.
rather than literary brilliance.
Okay, that makes me feel so much better.
Good.
They start with a simple suggestion, which is keeping a journal.
Yes.
Just jotting down a few sentences about your day.
Exactly. Something like, today I went to the park. The weather was sunny and warm. It's about getting comfortable with the basics
Yeah.
of sentence structure and using simple vocabulary.
Yeah, my journal entries are definitely a bit more dramatic than that.
Well, this isn't about winning any literary awards.
Right.
It's about practicing the fundamentals of writing in English.
Yeah. And they also suggest describing a place you've been, like a park, in detail.
Yes.
Again, using those descriptive words.
Right.
And practicing sentence construction.
It's a great way to challenge yourself to use a wider range of vocabulary
Okay.
and grammatical structures.
Okay, this next tip is so manageable, it almost feels too easy.
Okay.
They recommend writing just 5 sentences each night before bed.
But that's the beauty of it.
Yeah.
It's about making these habits so ingrained
Right.
that they become second nature.
Okay.
And there's some interesting research that suggests practicing a new skill before bed
Oh, really?
can actually help your brain consolidate the information while you sleep.
No way. So you're telling me I can improve my English while I sleep?
That's the idea.
That's amazing. What else did they suggest?
Well, here's a tip that's particularly relevant for our digitally connected world, texting in English.
Oh, that's brilliant.
Right.
It's such a natural way to incorporate practice
Yeah.
into your everyday life.
Absolutely.
And it's low stakes. You don't have to worry about making mistakes in front of a large audience.
Exactly. You can text friends, family, or even just practice with yourself in a notes app.
Right.
Just get those fingers typing.
I actually tried texting in Spanish with a friend who was learning.
Oh, fun.
And it was hilarious. We had to get really creative with emojis
I bet.
to get our point across.
That's fantastic. It sounds like you were having fun while learning, which is always the goal.
For sure. And for those who are active online, the podcast suggests joining English-speaking groups on platforms like Reddit or Facebook,
Oh, yeah. Great idea.
which is a great way to engage in conversations
Yeah.
and practice reading and writing in a more informal setting.
It's like you're surrounding yourself with the language.
Right.
Even if you're not physically in an English-speaking environment.
Okay, this next writing challenge I thought was really intriguing.
Okay.
Writing a 100-word story.
Ooh.
I'm not sure I could tell a compelling story in just 100 words.
That's the challenge, right? It forces you to be concise and deliberate with your words.
Yeah.
And it's a valuable skill for any type of writing,
Right.
not just creative writing.
And they even give a fun example. Write about your dream vacation.
Oh, I love that.
Oh, I'd have so much fun with that. My dream vacation involves a private island, a talking parrot, and an endless supply of chocolate chip cookies.
That sounds amazing.
Yeah.
And you see, it's easy to get carried away and write pages and pages.
Right.
But the 100-word limit forces you to prioritize
Okay.
and streamline your ideas.
It's about making every word count, which again is a valuable skill for any writer.
Yeah, absolutely.
So the key takeaway here, once again, is regularity over perfection. Just like with speaking and reading.
Yeah,
It's about making writing a consistent habit,
absolutely.
even if it's just for a few minutes each day.
Exactly. It's about building a routine that works for you
Right.
and sticking with it.
Okay.
And speaking of routine, they actually provide a sample daily plan
Oh, this is what I was waiting for.
for incorporating all of these skills into your life.
I love it when they give you like a concrete plan to follow.
I know, right?
So let's break it down.
Okay, so it starts with listening to an English podcast for just 10 minutes in the morning.
Okay. Totally doable.
Easy enough, right?
Yeah.
And then they suggest reading a short article for another 10 minutes in the afternoon.
Okay. Like a little mini break
It is.
for your brain, but with the added bonus of learning English.
Exactly. And it builds on what we've already discussed.
Yeah.
You can use one of the podcasts we mentioned earlier.
Right.
Or you can explore other resources based on your interests.
Okay.
And then in the evening, they suggest speaking out loud about your day for 5 minutes.
Okay. Again, this links back to that idea of,
Practicing even when you're alone.
yeah.
Making it a part of your,
Right.
your natural thought process.
Right.
Yeah.
And then finally, before bed, they suggest spending 5 minutes writing a short journal entry.
Yeah, just a little recap of your day, but in English.
Exactly. And the best part is all of these activities are like bite-sized and manageable,
Yeah,
even for the busiest of schedules.
absolutely.
This roadmap is seriously genius.
It is.
And they even provide a final golden nugget of advice.
Okay.
Make English a part of your life.
It's such a powerful reminder that learning English isn't just about completing exercises or studying grammar rules.
Right.
It's about integrating the language into your everyday life,
Yeah.
finding opportunities to think,
Yeah.
speak, and engage with English in authentic and meaningful ways.
I love that. It's about looking for those little moments throughout your day where you could just sprinkle in a bit of English practice.
Exactly, like thinking in English while you're grocery shopping,
Oh.
listening to English music while you're cooking,
Right.
or even watching a movie in English with subtitles.
Okay.
The possibilities are endless.
Yeah, it really is about creating your own personalized English immersion experience, isn't it?
That's exactly it. And it doesn't have to be this huge, overwhelming thing. It's about those small, consistent steps taken over time.
You know, going through this roadmap with you has been a real eye-opener. I feel like we've uncovered so many great tips and strategies,
Yeah.
and I'm actually excited to put them into practice myself.
Me too. It's so refreshing to see such a practical and, dare I say, enjoyable approach to language learning.
Yeah, and it all boils down to those 4 core skills, right? Listening, speaking, reading, and writing.
Absolutely.
We've covered each one in depth,
We have.
and I think we've really highlighted the importance of integrating them into your daily life.
Yes. And for me, the biggest takeaway from this deep dive is that consistency and enjoyment go hand in hand.
Right.
It's not about forcing yourself to study for hours on end.
Yeah.
It's about finding ways to make English a natural and enjoyable part of your daily routine.
I love that. It's about finding those little pockets of time throughout your day where you can connect with the language. Whether it's, listening to a podcast during your commute,
Yeah.
reading an article while you're waiting in line, or even just chatting with a language partner online.
Exactly. It's about those small, consistent actions that add up over time.
Right.
And when you enjoy the process,
Yeah.
you're so much more likely to stick with it and see real progress.
So What do you say? Are you up for a challenge?
Challenge accepted. Bring it on.
Okay, listeners, here's the challenge. Try following this roadmap for just 1 week.
Okay.
Commit to incorporating those daily habits we've been discussing. The listening, the speaking, the reading, the writing, even if it's just for a few minutes each day.
And most importantly, have fun with it.
Yes.
Don't be afraid to experiment with different resources and find what works best for you.
Right.
There's no right or wrong way to learn a language.
Exactly.
As long as you're enjoying the process.
This is just the beginning of your English learning journey. There's a whole world of language waiting to be explored. And with the right mindset and a little bit of effort, you can achieve fluency and unlock so many incredible opportunities.
I couldn't agree more. It's amazing how much you can achieve when you set your mind to it.
Right.
And embrace the process with enthusiasm and dedication.
And remember, we're here to support you every step of the way.
Absolutely.
Keep practicing, keep exploring,
Keep going.
and never stop believing in your ability to master this beautiful language.
Now, before we wrap things up completely,
Okay.
there's one final thought I want to leave you with.
Okay.
The podcast we explored today focuses specifically on the journey to fluency,
Uh-huh.
but I think it's important to remember that language learning is an ongoing process.
That's a great point. It's not like you reach fluency and then you suddenly stop learning, right?
Exactly. Language is constantly evolving, and there's always something new to discover.
Right.
Whether it's a nuanced grammatical structure, a regional dialect, or even just a new slang word that's trending online.
Right. So how do we keep that momentum going even after we've achieved, our initial fluency goals?
I think it's all about cultivating a mindset of lifelong learning.
Okay.
That genuine curiosity about the language and a willingness to embrace those inevitable challenges that come with exploring any new territory.
I love that. It's about seeing language learning not as a destination, but as an ongoing adventure.
Precisely. And that adventure can take you to some incredible places,
Yeah?
both literally and figuratively.
I like
It
that.
can open doors to new cultures, new friendships, new perspectives, and a deeper understanding of the world around us.
What are some practical ways to kind of keep that adventure going?
Okay.
To keep that spark of curiosity alive?
Well, for one, don't be afraid to step outside your comfort zone and try new things.
Okay.
If you've been focusing mainly on reading and listening,
Uh-huh.
challenge yourself to start speaking more.
Okay.
If you're comfortable with everyday conversations, try writing a short story or even a poem in English.
Those are great ideas. And I think it's also important to stay connected with the English-speaking community,
Yes.
whether that's through, online forums or social media groups or even just chatting with English-speaking friends or colleagues.
Absolutely. It's about surrounding yourself with the language and finding opportunities to use it in authentic and meaningful ways.
Yeah.
And don't forget about the power of storytelling.
Ooh, I love a good story. What do you have in mind?
Think about all the incredible stories that are out there waiting to be discovered, from classic literature to contemporary novels,
All right.
from blockbuster movies to independent films, from TED Talks to podcasts like this one.
Okay, you're speaking my language now. I'm a total podcast junkie.
Me too. And podcasts are such a fantastic way to immerse yourself in the language, learn about different topics,
Yeah.
and hear a variety of accents and speaking styles.
It's like having a conversation with interesting people from all over the world.
It is.
And the best part is, there's a podcast for literally every interest imaginable. I know, right? From true crime to history, from science to pop culture,
Yeah.
from personal development to, language learning.
Exactly. So if you're looking for a way to keep your English skills sharp, expand your vocabulary, and stay engaged with the language,
Uh-huh.
I highly recommend adding a few English language podcasts to your listening rotation.
And don't be afraid to branch out and explore different genres and formats. You might be surprised at what you discover.
Yeah.
And who knows? You might even find your new favorite podcast.
Exactly. So as we wrap up this deep dive,
Okay.
I want to leave you with one final challenge.
Okay, I like it.
What English language podcast are you going to explore next?
Ooh, that's a good one. And to make things even more interesting, how about we challenge our listeners to share their podcast recommendations with us on social media? We'd love to hear what you're listening to and what's inspiring you on your English learning journey.
That's a fantastic idea. We'll be sure to share some of our favorites as well.
This has been such an insightful and inspiring deep dive. I feel like we've uncovered a treasure trove of valuable information and practical tips for anyone looking to enhance their English skills.
I couldn't agree more. And remember, the most important thing is to enjoy the process and never stop exploring the wonders of this incredible language.
Until next time, happy learning.
Happy learning. So if you're looking for a way to keep your English skills sharp, expand your vocabulary, and stay engaged with the language, I highly recommend adding a few English language podcasts to your listening rotation.
And don't be afraid to branch out and explore different genres and formats.
Yeah.
You might be surprised at what you discover.
Yeah.
And who knows, you might even find your new favorite podcast.
Exactly. So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to
yeah.
leave you with one final challenge.
Okay, I like it.
What English language podcast are you going to explore next?
Ooh, that's a good one. And to make things even more interesting, how about we challenge our listeners to share their podcast recommendations with us on social media? We'd love to hear what you're listening to and what's inspiring you on your English learning journey.
That's a fantastic idea. We'll be sure to share some of our favorites as well.
This has been such an insightful and inspiring deep dive.
Yeah.
I feel like we've uncovered a treasure trove of valuable information and practical tips for anyone looking to enhance their English skills.
I couldn't agree more. And remember, the most important thing is to enjoy the process and never stop exploring the wonders of this incredible language.
Until next time, happy learning.
Happy learning.
And you never know, maybe one day our listener will be inspired to start their own podcast in English.
No, that's a thought. Sharing your unique perspective and voice with the world, all in your second language, that's really incredible.
Yeah?
It really speaks to how transformative language learning can be.
Absolutely. It's a journey of self-discovery, pushing boundaries, and ultimately connecting with others in a deeper way.
I think that that beautifully sums up what we've explored in this deep dive.
Yeah.
We started with that feeling of overwhelm. Then we uncovered this amazing roadmap packed with practical tips.
Right.
And now we're looking ahead to the endless possibilities that await.
It all started with a simple podcast episode you shared.
Yeah.
But look where we've ended up.
Right.
It's a reminder that every journey starts with a single step.
So to our listener, I encourage you, take that first step. Embrace the process, the ups and downs, and never stop exploring the beauty and power of the English language.
And on that note, until next time, happy learning.
Happy learning. All right, so we're back and ready for another deep dive. You guys ready? This time, we're tackling vocabulary.
Ooh, vocabulary. Love it.
Yeah, so we're going to unlock 25 words that can seriously boost your English fluency and honestly make you sound way smarter.
That's right.
We're not just throwing out random words, though.
No.
Our source material actually broke these words down into 5 categories so we can really, get a grip on them.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Makes it much easier.
Way easier.
Yeah.
So before we, jump into the deep end, want to give us a little overview of what we're diving into?
Sure. It's not just about using big words to impress people.
Yeah.
It's about using the right words to help you think clearly and express yourself better.
Yeah.
These words add nuance.
Totally. Sometimes I feel like I'm using the same old phrases when I'm trying to, get my point across or argue about something. It gets kind of boring.
Right.
So having these new words could be like a total game changer.
Absolutely.
All right. So let's jump into the first category.
Let's do it.
Opinions and arguments. It's like everyone's got opinions, but if you can't really explain them well or back them up, they kind of fall flat.
That's so true. That's where these words come in handy.
Okay, so hit me with the first one.
Substantiate.
Substantiate. Ooh, that sounds intimidating.
I know, right?
But useful.
Super useful. It basically means to provide evidence or proof for something.
Oh, okay. So instead of just saying, I think this is the best movie ever,
Right.
You could say, I can substantiate my claim.
Exactly. It elevates your argument, encourages critical thinking, makes you think twice.
You actually just helped me win an argument in my head.
Oh, yeah. Tell me about it.
Okay, so I was thinking about that article you sent me about topic related to the listener.
Mm-hmm.
And you know how they were saying opposing viewpoint?
Mm-hmm.
I could totally challenge them to substantiate those claims.
Boom. Mic drop.
Right.
See? That's how you use it.
Okay, next word, please. I need more ammo for these debates.
Okay, how about ambivalent?
Ambivalent. Oh, I love this one. This is so me.
Why? Why is it so you?
Because I am the queen of mixed feelings. Especially when it comes to, a relatable dilemma the listener has shared before. Some days I'm all for it, others I'm totally against it.
I think most of us can relate to that, though. It's that whole it depends feeling.
Exactly. You can't really make up your mind.
Ambivalent perfectly captures that. It acknowledges those gray areas in life.
Yeah.
Not everything is black and white.
Right, totally. And it sounds way smarter than just saying, I don't know.
So much smarter.
Okay, give me another one.
Okay. Plausible?
Plausible. Okay, now I always mix that one up with possible.
Yeah, I can see that. There's a subtle difference.
Help me out.
Possible just means something could happen. But plausible implies that it's actually reasonable to think it will happen, based on the evidence.
Okay, so like it's possible I might win the lottery tonight.
But it's not very plausible.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Unless I buy a ticket, then maybe it's a little more plausible.
Yeah, maybe slightly.
Okay. That makes a lot more sense.
Good.
What's next?
How about refute?
Refute. Okay.
Yeah.
That sounds kind of intense, like something you'd hear in a courtroom drama or something.
It is a powerful word. It means to prove something wrong, to disprove it, using facts, logic, the whole 9 yards.
Ooh, I like it. So it's not just about disagreeing.
No, it's about taking it a step further.
Yeah, like actually dismantling the other argument.
Exactly, with solid reasoning. You think about those online debates, where people are going back and forth, they're trying to refute each other's points.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense. I see it all the time.
All the time, right. And it's important to use this word strategically. It's not about shutting down conversation, It's about pushing for deeper understanding.
Oh, I like that. So refute, but don't be rude.
Exactly.
Okay, that's a good one. All right, so we've got some serious firepower for our opinions and arguments now.
Yeah, you're ready to take on any debate.
I know, right? I feel so much more articulate already.
That's the goal.
Okay, ready for part 2. Let's move on to describing people and emotions.
All right, let's dive in.
Okay.
We're going to explore how these words can help you understand yourself and others on a much deeper level.
All right, so part 2, huh? Advanced words for describing people and emotions.
That's right.
Okay, I'm intrigued, I gotta say. Lay it on me. What's the first word that comes to mind?
Well, let's start with resilient. Everybody knows someone who's like this, someone who just bounces back from anything.
Oh, totally. Like life throws them curveballs and they just hit a home run every time.
Exactly. They bend, but they don't break. Mm-hmm. And resilience, it's like a muscle.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. The more you use it, the stronger it gets.
Yeah.
Think about your own life for a second. What challenges have you faced that really forced you to build up your resilience?
Wow, okay. That's a good question. Let me think. There was that time when a personal anecdote that connects to the listener's experience with resilience.
Mm.
Yeah, I definitely had to dig deep and find that inner strength.
We all go through those moments, but it's how we bounce back, that really defines us.
Totally. And I think recognizing that in ourselves and in others can be super inspiring.
Absolutely.
Okay, so resilience, that's a good one. What about something a little less positive?
Okay. How about vindictive?
Vindictive. Ooh, yeah, not a quality you want to see in people too often.
Definitely not. It describes someone who's driven by revenge.
Yeah.
They want to see others suffer for things they think they've done wrong. It can get pretty messy.
Yeah, holding on to all that anger and resentment, that can't be good for anyone.
Nope, not at all.
Okay, let's move on to something a bit more uplifting.
Okay, yeah.
What about charismatic? We all know those people who just light up a room.
Oh, yeah, they've got that certain something.
Right. It's not always about looks or what they say. It's more like their energy.
It's true.
How they make you feel.
Totally. In charisma, it can be a bit of a mystery,
It's like a magnetic pole, right?
Exactly. They make you feel good just by being around them.
I know. And I always wonder, is that something you're born with or can you learn it?
Well, some people are naturally charismatic, that's for sure.
Yeah.
But I think you can definitely cultivate it,
Interesting.
Yeah. It's about being present, engaged, and genuinely interested in others.
So maybe we can all learn to be a little more charismatic.
I think so.
All right, that's a good goal. Okay, what else we got?
How about candid?
Candid. Oh, I like that one. It's like being honest and straightforward, right?
Yeah, even when it's tough. Candor is all about building trust. It's about saying what you really think and feel, but in a respectful way.
So it's like not sugarcoating things.
Exactly.
Being authentic.
Yeah, being real. It can be hard sometimes, but it's so important for building strong relationships.
Absolutely. We could all use a little more candor in our lives.
I agree.
Okay, so we've covered resilience, vindictive, charismatic, candid. It's quite a range of emotions and personality traits.
It is, isn't it? But it's just a taste of what's out there.
I know. I'm ready for more. What's next?
Well, how about we move on to some words for describing situations and events?
Ooh, okay. Bring it on. All right, part 3. What have we got?
Advanced words for describing situations and events.
Ooh, this sounds interesting. Okay, what's the first word that jumps out at you?
Precarious.
Precarious. It makes me think of like those moments where you're like one wrong move away from complete disaster.
Yeah, you got it. It conveys that sense of instability, like you're teetering on the edge.
Oh, totally. Like, remember the time I told you about when I was relatable but slightly risky situation the listener has shared before?
Okay.
That was precarious.
Totally precarious. Heart racing, right?
Oh, big time. But precarious can also be used for more serious stuff too, right?
Of course. We hear it a lot when people talk about like the global economy or those political tensions between countries.
Yeah. Yeah, it definitely adds a sense of urgency. Like things could go south really fast.
Exactly.
Okay, what's next?
Imperative.
An imperative. Okay, so that means like absolutely necessary, right?
Yep. It's not just a good idea. It's essential.
Oh, okay. So like breathing is imperative.
Exactly. Or stopping at a red light. Pretty imperative if you want to avoid an accident.
True, true. Makes it sound way more serious than just saying important.
It definitely raises the stakes.
Okay, love it. Give me another one.
Okay, how about arduous?
Arduous. Ooh, that sounds tough.
It is. It describes something that's really difficult, demanding, requires a lot of effort.
So like climbing Mount Everest, that's got to be arduous.
Super arduous. Or running a marathon, training for that.
Yeah. It's like, you know, it's going to be a challenge, but there's that sense of accomplishment when you finally get there.
Totally. You've pushed yourself to the limit.
Okay. I like that. What's next on our list?
Ephemeral.
Ephemeral. Ooh, now that's a beautiful word. It's always been one of my favorites.
It's pretty poetic. It captures that fleeting nature of things,
Those moments that are gone too soon.
Exactly. A sunset, a blooming flower. It's like a reminder to appreciate the beauty while it lasts.
Yeah. That's a good takeaway. Live in the moment, right?
Live in the moment.
Okay. Last word for this category.
Pertinent.
Pertinent. Okay, that just means relevant, right?
Yep. To the point. No distractions.
So, like, if we're talking about vocabulary, discussing the latest celebrity gossip wouldn't be very pertinent.
Not really, no. Unless, of course, the celebrity was known for their incredible vocabulary.
Okay, good point.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's about staying focused, making sure the information you're sharing actually matters to the conversation.
Exactly. No rambling.
All right, we've covered some serious ground here. From feeling precarious to embracing the ephemeral. I feel like we've really leveled up our descriptive powers.
I think so too. But we're not done yet. We've still got one more category to explore.
Oh yeah, that's right. Advanced words for science and technology. I'm ready to expand my mind even further.
Let's do it.
All right, so let's dive right in. What's the first word that comes to mind when you think about science and technology?
Well, it has to be paradigm.
Paradigm, yeah. It makes me think of those moments when, like, your whole understanding of something just completely shifts.
Exactly. Those aha moments, right? A paradigm is like a fundamental change in thinking, a new way of seeing the world.
It's like a major breakthrough, like the invention of the internet. That was a paradigm shift for sure.
Oh, absolutely. It revolutionized the way we communicate, share information, everything. And paradigm shifts don't just happen in science and technology. We experience them in our personal lives too,
Oh, yeah. Like, for the longest time, I thought a personal belief or assumption the listener might relate to. But then an experience that challenged that belief.
Wow.
It was like my whole perspective shifted.
Those are the moments that really shape us.
Yeah.
Force us to reevaluate things.
Absolutely. Okay, so paradigm, that's a powerful word.
It is. And it reminds us that change is constant.
Okay, next word, please. Keep those brain cells firing.
Okay, how about anomaly?
Anomaly. Now that one makes me think of like those weird occurrences that you can't really explain.
That's a good way to put it. And it's something that deviates from the norm.
Yeah.
Like in a science experiment, if you get a result that totally doesn't fit with your expectations, that's an anomaly.
Oh, okay. So like those glitches in the matrix.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Or those moments when you're like, wait, that's not supposed to happen.
Yeah, yeah. But sometimes those anomalies can lead to pretty amazing discoveries, right?
Totally. They force us to think outside the box, challenge our assumptions.
Makes sense. Okay, what else have we got?
Feasible?
Feasible, okay. Now, I know it means something that's possible, but it feels like there's more to it than that.
Right. It's not just possible. It's also practical. Achievable.
So, like, building a time machine might be theoretically possible.
Maybe. Someday.
But right now, not really feasible with our current technology.
Exactly. Feasibility takes into account, resources, limitations. It's about being realistic.
Okay, I get it. It's not just about what could be done, but what can realistically be done. All right, last word for this category and for our whole deep dive. I'm excited to see what it is.
Okay, let's wrap things up with empirical.
Empirical. Okay, that sounds very sciencey.
It is. It basically means based on observation or experience. Hard evidence.
So not just theories or ideas, but stuff you can actually see and measure.
Exactly. Empirical evidence is crucial in science. It's about proving things, with real-world data.
Okay, makes sense. Wow, we covered a lot of ground today. From opinions and arguments to science and technology, my brain is officially full.
Mine too. But in a good way, right?
Oh yeah, definitely a good brain full. And honestly, I feel like I could go out and have a much more interesting conversation right now.
That's the goal.
Like my vocabulary's gone from 0 to 100 real quick.
I love it. Using these words, it's not just about sounding smart. It's about understanding the world better, expressing yourself more clearly.
Totally. And who knows, maybe we'll even inspire some paradigm shifts along the way.
I love that. Keep those brain cells firing.
That's right. So to everyone listening, keep exploring, keep learning, and never stop expanding your vocabulary. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, and we'll catch you next time for another adventure in language and learning.